Today's 2028 presidential election prediction, we're going to be looking at the betting odds to see who's in the lead right now, forecasting years in advance who's going to actually be the victor of this election. As of right now, Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, has basically been in the lead this entire time for months. And I will tell you that he's at 27% support right now, recently at like 30%. In AOC, you've got at 14%, so far behind. Pete Buttigieg at 8%. And in all the polling I've seen, unsurprisingly, he gets 0% of the black vote, so he's not a likely contender at that point. Andy Bashir at about 6%. And so a lot of people don't know about him, so he's probably not going to be the nominee either. Now, if you look at the Republican side, JD has been in a comfortable lead. Most people assume he's going to be the successor. It's not ironclad yet, but most people, as in 53%, in fact, that are putting money on it, have him as the nominee. Now, the reason why I'm making the video is because you can Google this, and you'd see that JD does have an 11% lead on who's going to be the winner of the election for 28 on Polymarket, but the math isn't mathing. Now, the reason why JD is up on Gavin, in my opinion, is because if you look at the facts, he is more likely to be the nominee at this point. He has more of a logical reason to be the nominee over Newsom, who's going to have to be in a knife fight with a dozen other Democrats. And so it could really be an easy primary for JD, hence why he has a better chance of being the president on the basis that he'll be the nominee almost definitely. So that's why. Even with over 500 electoral college votes, there's only maybe 20% of them that are actually competitive. So let's just fill out the safe states. So now we've got about a dozen states and about 140 electoral votes that could be feasibly contested in a few years from now. Now, we're going to be addressing the macro trends as obviously we're far out from the election. And so what I want to lay down here is what is going behind each candidate's basically the backstory of the candidates are relevant, and of course their characteristics and how they will play off of each other is going to be pretty interesting. Also, as a caveat, Gavin Newsom doesn't have a vice president in this case, as doesn't JD Vance. I mean, probably Marco Rubio would be the VP in this case. Not that it would make much of a difference in the final result. And then for Gavin, God knows who the hell he's going to pick, whether it be Buttigieg, AOC, I don't even know. Bernie Sanders as a corpse, we don't know yet. But anyway, now looking at some of these trends, we've been seeing a turf war among the Democrats led by Newsom and then also implicitly J.D. Vance in regards to the Republicans fighting over this gerrymandering prospect. And how that plays out isn't known yet, so that's kind of an open question. But what you are noticing from this is that you see that Gavin Newsom is taking the lead against the Trump administration and Republicans as a whole. So again, building his name brand, more people knowing who the hell he is. Because again, if you're the governor of the biggest state, still most people probably don't know who you are at that point. Whereas JD does have the advantage of being more notable, arguably. Another open question we can put out there is, what is the party unification going to look like for the Democrats when Newsom wins the primary in this scenario? And what does it look like for Republicans when Vance does? The reason why I say this is because you have somebody in Trump who is unusual. He basically has won the elections in regards to the primaries, and pretty much all Republicans are backing Trump, whether they be some more soft Republicans or diehard MAGA diehards, okay? Anyways, the point is that with Newsom, it's going to be a more rancorous process to get all the Democrats together, potentially. The reason why I think that might not be the case, though, is because while he's pretty much a mainstream Democrat, he'll go wherever the wind blows, kind of Clintonian in that way. He is also somebody who can use Trump as a foil, despite him not even having a third term possible, probably. He's still going to be attacking Trump on the campaign trail. And what really is going to sign the certificate of death for J.D. Vance is on the basis of whether or not the Trump administration is perceived as being pretty good. Now, Trump's approval as of this second is like a -3. It's pretty even. It's where it usually is. Whether that helps or detracts from JD is what I'm asking. And what I would like to compare this election to is the 1988 election, where you had a personality cult around Reagan with a popular administration, a good economy, and you had the less charismatic successor in Bush, who still beat Dukakis. Now, this is different. Will Trump's approval rating be as high as Reagan's was? Definitely not. There's no way. The country's way too polarized. Trump's approval rating will go up 5 or down 5, and that's about it, okay? Back then, you could have seen a candidate like Dukakis be up 17 and still lose in the matter of months even. Now, when we're looking at Gavin Newsom, on the other hand, he's no Michael Dukakis. He is, well, I'll show you. Newsom, by all means, is a tall, telegenic white dude that talks really well. Again, beautiful family. And he does have all that you need for a president on paper. Okay, he's an intelligent guy. Now, if you look at his credentials, also governor of the biggest state in the country is more or less like the archetype of what you would want the president to have as prior experience. JD, on the other hand, again, tall dude. Some people call him a fat oaf. The Fuentes people, especially. His family's mixed. Again, not a really good look, even if you're okay with it, because it just kind of looks strange. Again, I'm Mexican, so we have different skin tones going on, so I don't mind. But anyway, back to the election though. This is going to actually play a part. In Gavin Newsom, I see a challenger that is going to be more difficult than any other Democrat on the basis that he's actually a cold-blooded psychopath. In fact, if I were to guess who the Antichrist is, he legitimately has a good shot of being the Antichrist from the Book of Revelation. We'll see. Anyways, the point is though, is that he's really good at talking. He is probably the most senior used car salesman in the lot. He could sell you a car that doesn't have an engine in it. He's the guy who would be blackout drunk and still talk his way out of a DUI. Okay, so he's really good at that. JD, on the other hand, is not as good of a speaker. He's pretty average. I've met him, nice dude, but again, a lot of people think that he's not as good as Gavin in that front. Now, on the other hand, though, Governor Newsom's whole record in California is objectively terrible. And that's not going to play well. Also, Governor of California, large state, okay, credit to you there. But the perception of California by most people to the right of Obama is a really negative one. Everybody hates California. You ask a Michigander, you ask a person in Arizona especially. A lot of people are feeling California for that reason, that it sucks. Now that we've established a lot of what is going to go into the election and the factors that will play into it, let's just give the 20-second rundown as to what's going to happen. So we have in JD somebody whose success will definitely be contingent on the success of the Trump administration. And on the other hand, you got a person in Gavin Newsom who is qualified on paper, is a great used car salesman, is telegenic. He mogs Vance, to use a young man's term, and he definitely has a strong chance here. But again, what will the public think about his terrible record as governor of California? So it's kind of like a really attractive girl with a ton of STDs trying to get you to marry her, okay? It's basically that. Like, can you overlook all the baggage? Can you? And that's what the voters are going to be asked, essentially, on November, whatever it is, in 28. So anyways, let's just get into the prediction itself where it counts. So as you can see here, JD's already at 219. He's already up by a lot, but what really remains here out in these states is a lot of blue. So, for example, New Mexico, which Trump basically lost by 6, which is remarkably impressive and shows that the Republican Party is getting stronger with Mexicans and minorities in general. I still don't think that JD will win New Mexico. How will he do better with Mexicans than Trump? I don't really see it. I don't know. I don't know what he would do. I mean, what minority support is he going to have that Trump doesn't? I think there's some black people that think that Trump is cool, just knowing some. And Mexicans respect the machismo, so to speak. But Vance doesn't have either, so I don't think he's going to do well there. Also, New Mexican liberals are very much of the same cloth of the Californian one, so that really makes sense. Then Minnesota, also very hard to predict now that I think about it. So Kamala won Minnesota by over 3% over Donald Trump in 24, and that's with her being a pretty unappealing candidate for Minnesota, for the Rust Belt writ large. And you also had Tim Walz on the ticket as well, so that might have helped a little bit, but not more than 1% anyway. So I do predict that Gavin will do well. And the reason is that what voter is going to actually cast the ballot for Gavin will be both liberals in general. He'll get all the left vote easily, and the anti-Trump vote that is kind of centrist, kind of independent, but they're like sick of Trump, don't care for JD or whatever. That's going to be the vote for Newsom, and I think that means that he'll perform like a generic Democrat, which in this case, I believe that Trump's approval would be like a -5, neutral maybe. Like it's going to be pretty much kind of cutting close to what it was in 2024. So that's my prediction for that state. But then when we move on to another one, New Jersey. New Jersey is a state that got remarkably close. I think that Trump lost it by only 5 or 6 points. That said, no, JD, again, what is he bringing to the table that Trump can't? You could say that he's more articulate. You could say that he's more traditionally intelligent. You could say that he doesn't piss people off the same way. But what he doesn't have is the likability of Trump, and the cult behind Trump will definitely not coalesce around JD. Now, they might all still vote for him generally. Yeah, why not? But they just don't love JD, and they won't, I believe. as compared to Trump. And so I just don't see how he's going to have a result that's better than Trump in almost any of the states. Because again, he doesn't really appeal to the people of New Jersey any more than Trump does, who's right across the river in New York or from there. So I believe Newsom carries New Jersey. Again, these are going to be in the margins. I can go into the margins, of course. I believe that Newsom could win Minnesota by, let's say, like two-ish. And you could say that New Mexico would probably be, you know, D+7 or something. And then you've got Virginia, which again got closer. And I actually believe that J.D. Vance could do better than Trump in Virginia, especially if he picks a guy like Glenn Youngkin as the VP, because he is more congenial and he's more of this suburban white dad archetype that people like in Virginia. So I do find him to be more competitive, maybe, but even still, I believe that Gavin still edges him out by like 2 or 3 points. Then we look at North Carolina. That should be a pretty easy state for J.D. Vance. I mean, realistically, North Carolina has been voting pretty Republican for decades at this point. I think Obama barely beat McCain, of all people, in North Carolina. This is not really a hard one to call. I think J.D. could win this by upwards of 5. And then when we look at Georgia, tough one to call. I mean, there's a lot of new people, new transplants in the Georgia, or rather the Atlanta area, that are going to be pretty friendly to Newsom in one angle, that they're like yuppies. But then on the other hand, you have people that are fleeing California, especially like movie tax credits that affords folks that are probably to the right of Newsom's policies, that are really probably hating on Newsom, that would be more likely to vote for Vance in that case. So I don't know where the numbers end up cutting through on that variable. But anyways, also, Trump did win Georgia pretty solidly, so I do think that there's enough of a cushion there for JD to win this by 1 or 2 points. And then when we look north to New Hampshire, we look at an election where I think JD also has more appeal than Trump, because again, New Hampshire's very socially libertarian. It's hard to explain, but it's more of like this like white Nantucket culture there. So I do believe that. Let me see the margin from last year. All right, so Kamala won New Hampshire by 3. Gavin is better for New Hampshire than Kamala is, just by all means. I think that goes without saying. So I'll probably predict that New Hampshire probably goes like 4 points for Newsom at that clip. And then we go to Pennsylvania, or no, well I'm going to tease you still with the result. Arizona, I believe that Newsom is going to be freaking awful for Arizona. I mean, his approval rating in Arizona theoretically is probably like a 25% or something. People hate him here. So this is going to be an easy JDW. He could win the state by 8 or whatever. And then Nevada is interesting. I think Nevada is, again, similar, like it's somewhat incestuous in how tied the states are economically. Again, California, SoCal in particular, and then Nevada, Vegas. But then again, I feel like a lot of people have either left for Nevada because of Newsom, or in part are already more keen of how California has fallen apart in the last couple decades. And so I think that they're more averse to Newsom than anything, even if they're a neighboring state and whatnot. And given that Trump did win the state by like 3 to 5% last time, I do believe that JD can carry the state by 3, 5, I don't know, but something like that. And then we move on to Wisconsin, which I believe is a state that's pretty hard to call. I do lean JD on this one. I know a lot of people will say that, oh, he has this appeal to the Rust Belt. And I mean, I can obviously see why, because of his life story. But to be honest, I feel like Trump appeals more. I feel like he has just more aura. And really, the mouthpiece is such an underrated part of a political resume, or a political person's acumen. You know, you could really BS your way out of a lot. And if you're not as charismatic, then you're not going to be as appealing to the Rust Belt workers as is a millionaire, you could say, trust fund kid in Trump, if you want to be uncharitable about it. So I do believe that Newsom could win Wisconsin in this case. Also, how the tariffs play out, something I didn't mention, very vital to how this turns out, okay? If the tariffs really do bring back jobs like Trump promises, then this looks very different. But until then, we'll just call it even on that. So Newsom +2 in Wisconsin. Now, Michigan, I believe, is another wild card. Last year, we had the whole Muslim factor. I don't think people are going to care about Israel and Palestine as much anymore, so that's not that big of a deal. In fact, those people are more likely to go back to Newsom rather than abstaining from the election like they did in droves last year. And so for that reason, that's a little bit of a W for Gavin. Then in respect to him actually appealing to the people of Michigan, I don't see this as playing out much different than Wisconsin, so I will just say that by the skin of his teeth, Gavin does pull out Michigan. And then the whole election goes down to Pennsylvania. Now, what's interesting about Pennsylvania that's different from the other Rust Belt states is that there's a component of shale oil and green energy, and how people like Gavin Newsom have been on the forefront of advocating green energy to the begrudging or to the what do you call it? To the negative effect of harming the fossil fuel industry. And that powers Western Pennsylvania a lot. And so the oil workers are going to vote more for, I think, Vance in this case than they did for Trump, even because Kamala also was hated on for that reason. But I think that JD will exploit this more in Pennsylvania than Trump did. Just given the benefit of hindsight. So I believe that JD does do pretty well in Pennsylvania. He'd probably edges this one out by like 3 or so. But then again, the 3 states that I just talked about are pretty close in regards to election turnout. So who knows? But anyways, for now, that's my prediction. Again, the election is over 3 years away, but so a little early. But anyway, so Gavin Newsom with 251 electoral votes, JD Vance at 287, and I believe that he's going to be the next president as of now. Things could change. Ultimately, I want to see how this plays out. Comment down below what your thoughts are. Like the video if you liked it. Subscribe if you want more content like this, and I'll see y'all on the next one. Adios.